next item then. So next I'll be talking about the Albany County Campus Strategic Plan. I'd like to invite up our Director of Campus Operations, Talisha Mottinger, at this time. She'll be speaking to the history and process of the development of the strategic plan, as she was chair of the committee. She was our chair of the committee that developed this. As you know, I arrived here in August. So I have basically been at the tail end of this process. So I thought it was most fitting to have Talisha fill you in. So with that, I would like to introduce our Director of Campus Operations, Talisha Mottinger.
Mr. Chairman, trustees, thank you for having us here tonight. As we've reported before, we are engaged in the strategic planning process. In order to develop the timeline, there are certain things we did. The first thing we did was develop a timeline. In order to do that, we decided that we needed to have a draft of a strategic plan in place and ready for the Associate Vice President of ACC when that person started in mid-August. So we started the strategic planning in spring of last year, and then we just finished up with it at the end of the summer. We did involve a group of stakeholders. We had some key stakeholders that were part of this process. We had some deans here at the Cheyenne campus that were part of this process. We also had some staff members in Albany County, and we had a new faculty member and a senior faculty member. We also had some key stakeholders in the community. The mayor of Laramie was part of the process, and Trustee Cadle, and a few other stakeholders from Laramie. The first thing that we did was we conducted research. We started with the environmental scan that, if you remember, we did present last year here. We started with all the data and the research we had from the environmental scan, and we found where all the holes were in our research, where we needed to do a little bit more digging. So we did conduct a few more focus groups. We went out and met with a few more industries in order to round out all of that research. And once we had all that research together, we built a SWOT analysis. And we also talked about some of the different partners and potential partners, what we could do as a local and what we needed as a regional group. And that was how we developed the strategic plan and the full cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. So I really wanted to draw attention to the vision of this strategic plan, because I think it really gets to the core of how we're taking the overall mission statement and strategic plan of the institution and really adapting it to the community in Laramie. So the vision is to become an integrated learning destination inspired by community to facilitate innovative education. And I think you can see the obvious parallels between our own mission and vision statements at the institutional level. But again, trying to always think within that local context, because we're only one hill away, but it's quite a different place when you get over there. So we really organized this plan according to three large pillars. And the pillars are, and I believe you may have a draft of this in your handout. The first pillar is integration, second is innovation, and the third is creation. And these three pillars will really guide all the efforts we do. And I said I used to be an English teacher, so I always think of it as the vision is sort of our thesis, and these are our main arguments. So the idea being that everything we do really needs to fit into one of these categories, to either integrate, innovate, or create. So to go into each of these, if we look at integration, our large goal for this is to integrate education into the local community by collaborating with educational partners, businesses, nonprofits, and workforce development. And this is quite a broad spectrum goal. And as the individual draft of the plan shows, we have a lot of subsets on how this will happen. For instance, one of the goals or sub-goals is to redefine courses and schedules to meet the needs of ACC stakeholders. Obviously, one of our big populations over there are UW students. UW traditionally starts when we do. However, we've noticed that a lot of students, particularly in the spring, if they find out they're on academic probation, it's often after our A16 block begins. To enable us to catch a lot of those students, we've migrated to a course schedule over in ACC that focuses heavily on the B14 and now B12 blocks. Additionally, we're running into some space issues where we have so many students that we can't necessarily organize and schedule our classes in a way that we can really fit them all at the times they need to be, or even when instructors need to be there. So we're also exploring a hybrid option. And this semester, traditionally where we would offer maybe 8 classes in the B12 blocks, which start 4 weeks after our A16, we're now offering almost 30 classes in that block. And the idea being to really see how it works. And this is also a matter of data collection. Are we actually catching students? But with the hybrid classes, because they don't need to meet face-to-face all the time, potentially we cut down on 50% of our room needs. So we're able to really maximize the space we have. And the second I'm talking space, you can see why I was asked to talk about WyoTech as well, because looming over all of this is the fact that we have a campus expansion planned, ready to go. As you know, it needs to get additional legislative approval because it was over what the expense, I believe, was estimated. But if WyoTech goes forward, that raises larger questions about that expansion. So again, I can't comment on all of that just because the prospectus, I think, will do the talking on that point. But as we talk about integration, we're really looking at ways we can bring the community in. We're looking at ways to get our students that experiential learning pathway and experience that is part of the Pathways Initiative. One of our key groups of stakeholders over there are the Student Leadership Committee. They are a very motivated group. I believe we discovered the other day they're all business students. So it's a shame Jeff isn't here. But again, we really are putting the students, giving them as much agency as we are able to let them drive how they want this campus to become more integrated into the community. To that point, we have them right now planning a student town hall over there where they will be able to interface with leadership and talk to us and give us feedback on what they want to see happen. So they're organizing that right now. And that's the type of leadership that, again, dovetails with what we're talking about with the entrepreneurial element of Pathways, that innovative, creative thinking that really will help students move beyond just getting a job, but thinking about how to create them down the line as it goes. So integration as well is about developing programs. One of the programs that we've been looking at is fermentation science. We know that it is a major industry in Wyoming, increasingly in Wyoming, in neighboring states. And for us not to be exploring that is a real missed opportunity. And we're looking at ways we can really make it a destination program. And the idea being nesting, say, a certificate within a diploma, within an associate's degree. Because our students that are coming up to us now, they're used to things like Khan Academy, MIT's OpenCourseWare, Duolingo. They are not used to that traditional semester model. And if we expect them to conform to us, it might not work out. So we're really looking at ways we can take what is an appealing idea and putting it in a format that is much more what they would expect. And at the same time, because we are a member of the WUI Witchy Alliance, we're able to draw students in from those neighboring states. And hopefully, as they see the quality of education and the quality of service, keep them and the resources in the state. The second item then, innovation, speaks to the point I was just talking on. The idea that our students are experiencing a different form of education than we did when we went through the same process they have. It's a new world, it's a new set of technologies, and if we aren't really looking at how to maximize that, we are the ones that are going to be wondering what is wrong. And that's, again, why we're engaging our student leaders to really talk to them and say, what do you want to see happen? How do you see the future of this campus taking shape? So again, we want to create experiential learning opportunities. We want to partner with local school district, Albany County School District. We met with them just the other day to talk about the idea of where do they want their programs to go. And one of the principals there said, you know, we've been really pushing hard American Sign Language, and that cohort that has been doing it is about to be up to the post-secondary level. So I'm really trying to forge those partnerships so we can see things that we otherwise would not have thought of. And whether or not that's a route we go, that partnership can really take us places that we might not have thought to go in the first place. Nesting within that, of course, is the larger concept of the BOCES that would help us really move forward. However, again, WyoTech looms, because the second we say, WyoTech will happen, but we need money, then we go back and say, well, we can do a BOCES, but we need money. And then they already say, well, we already gave you money for LHS, the Laramie High School. So you can see why there are sort of many balls in the air that we're trying to juggle. And until the larger issue of WyoTech gets resolved, I think many of these are sort of still going to be in the air. but it's something that absolutely we can build on and capitalize on.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question at this juncture in regard to BOCES? Since I've been on the board here, I've been involved in a task force, which happens to be dormant at this time. And the BOCES issue seems to be very difficult to get moving with the high schools. I'm curious as to how far you have gone with your partnership discussions there toward a BOCES. You indicated that the WyoTech thing has kind of put this BOCES issue off to the side. And I wonder why. Why can't they be going simultaneously?
And this gets to a larger issue that I'd like to really focus on, Trustee Erickson. The notion of, I think very often when we look at school districts or school educational institutions, particularly in Laramie, we have University of Wyoming, Albany County School District, you have Whiting, you have Laramie High School, and then you have us, the ACC of LCCC. And I think very often the educational model has been one of an economy of scale, and that how many students can each institution pump through and see where we go from there. And I think that's the enrollments issue. But I think one of the ways that the innovation that we're talking about is to really refocus on an economy of scope. And this is where we start looking at the BOCES. And I think it really takes a fundamental change in the way we perceive the students, particularly in Laramie, and that they are not ACSD students, they are not Albany County students, and they are not UW students, but they are all part of the same student population. If we start to look for congruencies between, say, what we're doing at LHS or what they're doing, they have an amazing culinary facility over there. How can we train our students and their students at the same time? And I think case in point is our auto program over there. We have a teacher who does an amazing job. We always hear fantastic things from the students and really trying to build that together. And I think this leads into that question of BOCES. And the reason WyoTech, I think, is the question, and this is something that was sort of brought up the other day when we met with the Albany County School District officials, is that it's a matter of money. And how much can we ask before people say no? And that's why I say, I think as we focus on that economy of scope and say, look, you aren't paying for one thing. You are paying for all of this. And again, we get back to that notion of what is the return on investment. And if you give us $1, it is not paying just LCCC. It is paying for LHS, ACSD, LCCC, UW, and it's building that. And I think it gets to the item here with the idea of innovation. We're looking at articulation agreements. University of Wyoming is starting a transfer relations center. In that center, they just have 2 new hires that hopefully will be brought on soon. I was asked to be part of that hiring committee, so hopefully it will happen very soon because we've done all we need to do. They have an articulation manager and a transfer manager. And I think what that will really see happen is all the programs when we're talking about, we're trying to get that articulation, we are going to have a dedicated person at UW that will really work with each institution to build that. So when the question of BOCES comes up, it's not a matter of a pathway just between LCCC and UW, but it's a matter of that pathway K, kindergarten through credential. Is that credential at us? Is that credential at UW? Well, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, we can take students that full route. And I think as we start to articulate that vision and articulate it via our strategic plan, the question of BOCES and the question of money almost becomes irrelevant because when you see what it can do, when you see what other school districts do, I don't think it becomes a question of money. I think it just becomes a question of why hasn't it happened yet? But getting to that point is going to take some talking and sales. And so that's part of this plan, is to build that foundational and institutional trust. So hopefully that answers your question.
I love your vision, and God bless you.
So with innovation, again, ultimately it needs to lead to some level of creation. And this is where we're looking at new programming. Fermentation science is one that our environmental scan, among other things, has shown is a real opportunity. But again, that economy of scope. Culinary, we're working with a variety of community leaders to really look at how we can bring a culinary curriculum to our students, to our community. And part of this is also looking at what we can do at a larger level to bring back over the hill to Cheyenne. Because as different as Laramie is, we are one institution. And I think that the key element here is that we are not necessarily talking about doing things and we'll go off on our own, but we're looking at ways we can strengthen LCCC as a whole. And I think if we lose sight of that, we lose sight of the real purpose of the campus here. And it's really to advance the institutional mission, which is again why I draw your attention back to the vision statement and the parallels with the institutional mission and vision. Because we are the Albany County campus, but we are LCCC. And you cannot separate the two, even though you might have to do things a little differently over there and then you might here.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hammond, I want to interrupt you just really quick. Are you going to be at our retreat on Friday? Do you know?
I'm going to do my best. We have a scheduling item where we're going to have a Albany County Advisory Council meeting over there at noon. So as soon as that's done, I'm going to run over here. I'm going to obey the speed limit, but I'll run over here. So I will do my best to be here.
Okay. Well, at the trustees meeting we had in Casper, there was a presentation there from, was it CWC, about the mountain climbing, and it was destination programming. And it's something that I am interested in talking about. And somebody else mentioned something earlier tonight, or maybe it was Juan Antonio, I forget, about some destination things like, well, we have the Capitol right here. It was Dave mentioned it. We have the Capitol right here. So there's some things we could do. I think Brady is right on with this too, about destination programming in Laramie, of all things, right next to the mountains. So anyway, I wanted to bookmark that and have further discussion about that, because it plugs right into this slide.
Trustee Little, so marked.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Little. And I would just like to add that this plan is the product of an excellent team that I have had the good fortune to come into at the Albany County campus, and a community that has been so easy to just jump right into. So I'm presenting this, but this was the hard work of so many other people on that campus long before I showed up. So again, they really deserve the bulk of the credit on this. Really, my job is to help see it into fruition at this point, but they are the ones that did the hard work on this.
Then we have a lot of people behind the idea.
And then, of course, the second we say destination, I'm sure all of you are aware of the fact that WyoTech has 4 dormitories. So the idea of housing initially was envisioned as partnering with the hospitality industry, because there are a number of hotels in the Laramie area. But what shape that might take now, again, is a larger question mark due to the other elements of Laramie. But in terms of implementation, where we'll go with this, again, it represents the long-term goals. These are not things that will happen overnight. I think 5 years is probably the point we'll put on it, but in order to really figure out where to go, the first step is approval. So tonight we are simply presenting this for your information, feedback, and so forth. It will, my understanding, it will be voted on probably at the next board meeting. Is that accurate? In a future board meeting. And in the intervening time, we will also be seeking community feedback, including with our campus constituents over in the Albany County. Then once we get that approval, we'll really look at how we're going to make this operational. Because again, how do we know we have succeeded if we don't even know how to measure it? How do we know how to measure it if we haven't even talked about the steps it will take to reach that? So that's really the next step after we get approval. Finally, really figuring out, well, now we know what we're looking at, but how do we know if we succeeded? How do we know if we have a successful destination program? Is it by the number of people that show up, the number of credentials? And that's something that once this gets approved, we'll really dig into and figure out how to take it where it ultimately needs to go. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Board have any questions? So with that said, I'm going to change things up a little bit and see if there's any public comment on this. No? All right. Thank you guys very much. Very good job.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and trustees.
All right. On to some policies. This is up for second reading. and we have a staff recommendation. But we also have Victoria Steele and Sabrina Lane with us. The floor is yours.